Okay, here is my completely honest review of this 2016 Gen 5 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-10R. So I've had this bike for about 6 months now, so I thought I would give my opinions on it, what I like about it, what I don't like, its features, how good it is on the road, and how good it is on the track as well. So a little bit of context, this is a 2016 Ninja ZX-10R. This is the ABS model and the KRT edition. The KRT edition is basically just the fairings you see, the fancy design on the fairings, which reflects the Kawasaki racing team liveries. When I bought this bike, it had 8,000 miles and I paid £8,000 for it, and that is Great British pounds, which I think is a fair deal for this bike considering it's a 2016, and when you compare it to the likes of other 2016 bikes like the S1000RR and the Yamaha R1, they typically sell for around £12,000 for that kind of mileage and that year, so you are getting a fantastic deal on this. Also considering how similar the specs are and how similar the performance is between those three bikes. So just going over a few of the standard features on the bike, you've got the Brembos on the front plus the Brembo master cylinder. You don't get Brembos on the rear, unfortunately, you just get the Nissin on the rear. You get fully adjustable Showa suspension on the front and the rear, which is fantastic. You get an Öhlins steering dampener. You also get a quick shifter from factory. So some models came with only the quick shift for upshift, but some did come with quick shift up and down plus the blipper. This model doesn't have it, but the regular quick shifter is fine for me. Would be nice to have the blipper as well though. If you've seen the Gen 5s, you'll know how fantastic the dash is. You've got this big orange bar that goes right across the top of the dash. It's amazing. It's probably everyone's favorite feature of the Gen 4s and the Gen 5s. So in terms of tech that you get with the bike, you get the ABS, you get traction control where there's 5 modes, and then there's a 6th mode which is off. Apparently there is the wheelie control included in the traction control, but there is no dedicated wheelie control on this bike. You do get launch control as well. You get 3 power modes. You get full, medium and low, so that's 100%, 80% and 60%. Obviously if you're buying one of these, you're buying it for the power, the speed, you're going to keep it in full. That's certainly what I do. I also keep it in traction mode 1, which is the lowest aside from off. And then you also get a feature to turn the engine braking on or off. The engine braking is pretty minimal on this bike anyway. I couldn't imagine turning it off for road riding. Maybe for a bit of track riding you would consider turning it off. So there's 2 different figures apparently for the power output of this bike. Without the Ram Air feature, it's 199 horsepower, and with it is 207 horsepower. So it is a pretty powerful bike, considering bikes like the S1K and the R1 have about 199 horsepower. So this is probably one of the most powerful bikes from its year. I'm getting these figures from NCN News. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of different figures for power outputs out there. I'm not saying this is the most powerful bike and that means it's the best. These are just the figures that I've seen online, and that is taking into account the Ram Air feature. So that's the standard features. I'm just going to talk you through everything that I myself have done to this bike. Basically, when I got it, it was stock. All it had was an R&G tail tidy and a Pipeworks exhaust. So things that I have done to this bike, starting from the front end, obviously black screen, headlight covers, Puig mirror caps, which means a mirror delete. I still have indicators and they are here. I'll just show you them now. These are new Rage Cycle indicators. They are fantastic. They look nice and tucked away down there, and it allows me to run no mirrors but still have my indicators. I do have mirrors. They're these little bar end ones. I only have them just so I can see who's behind me if I'm riding in a group basically. Then I've got these ASV style adjustable levers. These stock levers are not adjustable, and I prefer having shorties as it means it kind of forces me to 2-finger the brake lever. And they have 6 levels of adjustability, so definite preference right there. Domino grips, fantastic, the best grip out there. They're only like 25 quid and they are amazing. Then we've got the block tank grips and a tank pad here. Then we've got some crash protection. These are just some little mushroom bungs from AliExpress, nothing crazy. Didn't really like the look of the R&G ones. I wanted something a bit more subtle, so we went with these. I've also got PP tuning rear sets. These are very aggressive rear sets. They, you know, have your leg up nice and high, but the footrest is very grippy and the brake lever is fantastic. Same on the other side. I've got it in GP shift, so I am 1 up, 5 down. Definite preference for me, but GP shift, that's a whole other story. Then I've got the Race Fit Titanium Black Edition exhaust. fantastic, super light. It weighs under a kilo, and then my Pipeworks weighs like 3 kilos, 4 kilos, so a lot of weight saving. Yeah, super loud as well, and with the stock titanium headers, makes it a full titanium exhaust system. Then we've got a black rear seat cowl. I've done the Ninja infield in green as well. Then I've got a Garage Works flip plate with a 7x5 plate on as well. I've got some bobbins down here as well for the paddock stands and tyre warmers that I use. Then on the tyres, I've got Pirelli Rosso Corsa 4s. So this is a dual compound tyre, so harder in the centre, softer on the outside. Fantastic tyre for fast road riding and track riding as well. And that's basically everything I've done to this bike. My next plans for the bike are probably an air filter and a tune, and then I might think about getting some different coloured fairings on the bike just to make it really stand out. So what do I like about the bike? Well, the first thing is the speed and the power. That is my favourite thing about this bike. Before this, I had a 2011 CBR 1000RR Fireblade, and in comparison to that, this makes the Fireblade seem pretty tame, and the Fireblade had no rider assists like this bike does. I would say this bike is very raw feeling compared to other bikes like the S1K and the R1. And yet I have rode both of those bikes, and I will just say this bike is a lot more raw feeling. What else do I like? I like the looks of this bike. It looks absolutely fantastic, especially in this KRT colorway. Very aggressive looking headlights, is very symmetrical unlike the S1K, and it is just a all-round really nice looking bike. And what about the handling? Well, I think the handling is fantastic. It does handle very similarly to the Fireblade that I had. Maybe I wasn't pushing either of these bikes enough to kind of feel a difference, but this bike does handle really nicely. I've had it on the road and I've had it on the track as well. If you're riding this for a long journey, it's not great. It's not a comfy bike to ride on a long journey. It is a bike that is made to go fast, and it does that really, really well. I am yet to get the suspension set up because it is fully adjustable front and rear. I think I'm going to do it next track season, get it set up at a track for my weight, my height, all that kind of stuff, and see how we go from there. So another thing I like is the dash, the rev counter. It's amazing. I feel like I rarely ever have to look down at it completely because it is so in my peripheral vision, and I have it set up to flash at the optimal shift point that I feel myself never needing to look down, always being able to have my focus directly in front of me on the road ahead. And yeah, it's one of people's favorite things about this bike is the dash, and the amount of compliments I get on the dash is insane. And the final thing that I absolutely love about this bike is the sound. You cannot beat the inline 4 screamer bikes like this Ninja. I've got a race fit exhaust on there, and the headers are titanium from factory, making it a full titanium exhaust. It's very loud, sounds amazing, and it does pop and bang and spit flames. It does everything like that, which is just fantastic. It can get a bit frustrating on a longer ride, you know, you get the droning in your ears, but I do have some really good earplugs, so it kind of cancels that out. So what don't I like about this bike? Well, there's only really 2 things I don't like. I would say that the front suspension is a little bit stiff for road riding. I do feel a lot of pressure on my palms quite often, but on the track it was absolutely fine. So you can get it set up for road and track use, or just complete road use where it has been softened a lot. I haven't done that yet, so it's kind of my fault, you know, complaining about it hurting my hands. It's my fault for not getting set up, but from factory it is probably too stiff. And then the only other thing that I don't really like about this bike is the fact that it has halogen headlights. I've actually unplugged the right one, which is the daytime running light, because I hate it that much. It just kind of ruins the look of the bike. But as you can see, when I put the full beam on, it has these old halogen headlights, which I find confusing as to why they've done that, because they also include an LED light here. Why couldn't you just make the whole bike LED with these lights being LED as well as this, or those fancy xenon bulbs as well? And that's kind of really it for what I dislike about this bike. But if you're looking at buying one of these, what should you watch out for? Well, the main thing I would say that you should watch out for is the starter motor. That is the main problem that I've had with this bike. I bought it at 8K. I had the starter motor die at 10,000 miles, which seems absurd considering some bikes will go 50,000 miles plus on the original starter. No idea what the problem is, and it is a bit of a ball ache to change it, as you have to take the thermostat housing off and then put it back on with a new gasket and the specific type of sealant that's heat resistant, blah blah blah. And yeah, they are quite expensive for a Kawasaki starter. I want to say about 850. I did buy a JMP starter from eBay. This was only £200. And then it was the best part of half a day, you know, taking it all apart, fitting it and putting it back together. Bit of a pain, but that's probably the only thing I would say to watch out for on these bikes is the starter motors. I've not really had any other real problems with it, let's say. And I've put about 5,000 miles on it and I've had it for 6 months. So there's not really a whole lot else I can say bad about this bike. The only other thing I'd say to be aware of is if you want to put a race fit exhaust on the bike like this, and it is basically a straight pipe exhaust at this point, just be wary of your ears. You are going to want to get some earplugs, as this thing's loud, it spits flames, it pops, it bangs, and your ears will be ringing after if you're not using earplugs. If that's not your thing, there are plenty of exhausts available. I did have some trouble getting this bike onto a track. I had a Pipeworks R11 exhaust, which is a huge exhaust, and I thought that would quieten it down enough, and I still had to have the baffle in it to get it on track. So just be wary if you're taking this on track and you're in the UK and you have decibel track limits, that you will need an appropriate exhaust to get it on. So what is the bike like to ride on the road? Well, I'm going to do a little POV setup and talk you through my thoughts of riding this bike on the road.
So what is the ZX-10R like to ride on the roads? So starting with the power and performance. This bike is insanely powerful. It has so much top end power, and when you're up in the revs, it seriously delivers. It's great fun on all types of roads, especially B roads like you're seeing now. It has decent mid-range pull, and obviously, like most superbikes, it is gutless in the low revs, but you're never going to be in the low revs. You are always wanting to be up in the rev range. So in terms of handling, it's fantastic. This bike is insanely capable in the corners. Really nice weight distribution, and it is super flickable and very stable when turning the bike in. I'll probably never be able to outride this bike, but I still have a great time on these B roads. So you've got a fair amount of electronics and safety aids, which is great for the roads. You've obviously got traction, ABS, launch, engine braking, all that kind of stuff, which is great for adverse conditions on the UK roads, so riding in the damp and the cold, and it just gives you a whole lot more confidence. And then the brakes and suspension. Well, you've got top tier components for the brakes and suspension, obviously with Brembo front brakes and Showa forks. You have an insane amount of stopping power, which is great for the UK roads where you never know what is coming around the next corner. So the suspension is great for fast B roads like this, but when you're going at lower speeds or you're not on a smooth surface, it doesn't perform as well, as it is a little bit stiff, and you will kind of feel the fatigue in your wrist after a long time of riding. So what about the negatives? Well, you know, this bike is made to go fast around a track. It's not going to be great on all road conditions. For example, everyday riding and traffic use, you know, it's not going to be great. The ergonomics of the bike are not good for that, as the riding position is very aggressive. So if you're doing long stints or you're crawling through traffic, you are going to get a lot of strain in your back, knees and your wrists. I'm about 6 foot tall, and I do feel a lot of fatigue in my knees, back and wrists after a long ride. I only really take it up to a maximum of an hour and a half each way on longer rides, you know, down to the coast, Portsmouth, Southampton, Brighton, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I do kind of feel a lot of fatigue after riding it. Low speed behavior, you know, if you're crawling through traffic, it's pretty crap. There is basically nothing down at the low revs. You want to be riding this bike up in the revs at all times. You know, it can feel quite lethargic, and obviously the bike is not going to be very happy if you are just plodding along through traffic. And like I said before, the suspension firmness and bad road surfaces are going to make you hate this bike. You know, the suspension is not made for that. It is made for nice smooth tracks, but you can get the suspension softened up a bit if you are gearing this bike towards more road riding. So in terms of the weight and size of this bike, you know, it weighs about 199 kg, which, you know, is actually quite respectable for a super bike. It's a nice weight. For me, it's not too heavy. You know, I can maneuver this bike around just fine. The turning circle's obviously crap, so if you want to do U-turns in the road or you're spinning this bike around for parking, it's not great. I can stand turn this bike, so you know that makes it a bit better for me. But yeah, you just have to be careful maneuvering this bike around in slower speeds. And what about the running costs? Well, fuel consumption is crap. I get about 100 to 120 miles per tank. And that's with a combination of, fast B-road riding and a little bit of motorways. Stuff like oil, filters and changes, they're not actually too expensive. You could probably get that all done for, £80 for all the parts. And then, it's not hard to do, so you can do it yourself. So you'll save on costs there. I probably do about 2 oil changes per year, especially if I'm doing track days. I am yet to do the spark plugs on this. I need to get the valve clearances checked at 15,000 miles. That's when it's recommended. I'm on about 13,000 miles, so that's something I need to get done soon. I want to say it's probably about £400 to get them checked, and then probably about £1,000 if they need doing. I'm not too sure. I've never actually done it on a bike, but that is one of the major services that you need to get done on this bike. So basically, if you are a fair weather rider who rides on nice B roads and does the occasional track day, doesn't do too many long stints on the bike, then this is the bike for you. This is not a touring bike. If you wanted something that is like a sports tourer, you'd probably want to go for like a Busa or a Blackbird or something along those lines, as this thing is not very comfortable on longer journeys, but it does excel in the corners. It's a performance bike, it's going to be great on the track, but that doesn't mean you can't go for this bike if you cannot compromise on the comfort. I'm sure you can get comfier seats, you can get the suspension softened up, and you can gear this bike to slightly more colder or wet weather riding, getting heated grips and getting some more suitable tires.
So that's what I think of it when riding on the road. What about riding it on the track? I've had it 2 times on the track now, both at Brands Hatch Indy circuit, and well, safe to say it was fantastic. That is what this bike is built for, to go fast around tracks. So I'm going to play a couple of my laps and talk you through them, where the bike excelled, where the bike didn't excel, and what I'd recommend you do if you want to take this bike on the track.
So what is the ZX-10R like on track? Well, it is absolutely fantastic. I cannot fault the bike on the track. I've had it around Brands Hatch Indy a couple times, and you're going to be seeing me riding it there now on the screen. And yeah, I can't fault it. It is absolutely fantastic. It's an absolute monster, and it performs exactly how you would expect it to on a track. Now, I must say I am not the best rider on a track, but I had 0 issues riding this bike on the track. It was very predictable, it was very stable, and yeah, I had an all-round amazing time. I think my fastest time I put down on this day was 58 seconds in the novice group, which will probably tell you that yeah, I'm not the best rider, but I still had an amazing time. So the bike was developed closely with Kawasaki's World Superbike team, and yeah, that absolutely shows. It has amazing acceleration, the power comes on really smoothly, it's great braking into the corners with the Brembos, and the handling's fantastic. Like I said, even for the road it's flickable, but on the track even more so, and you feel very confident at doing it as well. And this is where that stiffer suspension works perfectly. It gives you amazing mid-corner feel, really great stability under braking, and you can whack power on seemingly anywhere, and it feels very confident doing so. I would recommend getting the suspension tuned for your weight. This is something that I'm yet to do, but I think on my next track day with the bike, I will get it done. I'm going to get it done for fast road riding and track riding. Like I said before, the Brembos are fantastic. I didn't really touch the rear brake on the track, mainly doing front end braking, but you can brake very, very late into corners, as you'll see me doing in the video, and you still feel in total control. I actually turned the traction control up to 3 at the start of the day, and then I put it back down to 1. I didn't actually feel much difference in this. I've got so much grip on the track with these tires and the heat conditions that were there on the day. So yeah, didn't really feel the traction control kicking in. Not that you really would unless, you're absolutely hammering it, which, like I said, I'm in novice group, so I'm not doing that. Quick shifter, as always, absolutely flawless on the track. I am in GP shift, so that is perfect for track riding. And I use GP shift because it just feels so much better to tap down. It feels a lot more natural. And when you're absolutely hammering it down the straight and you're tapping down, it feels like it doesn't upset the bike as much as it would going the other way. I'll put a couple of photos of me riding on the track so you can kind of see how I look on the bike. Like I said, I am 6 foot tall. Obviously my body position is not the best, I never really get knee down, that kind of stuff, but I'm giving it a good try. So yeah, overall, very confident feeling bike on the track. absolutely tons of power. You know, you can really crack it on the straight, and like I said, late braking is one of my favorite things to be doing with this bike. As you know, the Brembos and the traction, it gives you so much confidence, so you know, you can push harder and harder with each lap.
So there we have it. That is my honest review of the Ninja ZX-10R. That is the Gen 5, as this is a 2016. The Gen 5s ran from 2016 to 2020, and after that it was the Gen 6s, where they've got the new fancy front end. Personally, this looks better. I just like the look of the front end on this. Some people might agree, some people might disagree. It is just personal opinion. But yeah, I love this bike. I feel like there is not a lot of places I can go after this bike. You know, this is kind of an end game bike for a lot of people. The only bike I really want after this one is maybe a Panigale V4S or a Aprilia RS V4 1100. Other than that, this thing does everything I need it to do. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review of my Ninja ZX-10R. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comment section down below. And I hope this was helpful for anyone that is looking to buy one of these bikes and just give you a little bit of insight into what it is like owning them.